Everyone thinks jealousy is a sign of love. It isn't. Jealousy is what happens when fear puts on the mask of love. And that is exactly why it destroys so many relationships while pretending to protect them. It usually starts with something small. A pause in their voice, a name you have seen too many times, a laugh that lasts half a second longer than it should. Nothing concrete, nothing you could prove. But your body reacts anyway. Your chest tightens, your attention narrows, and your mind stops asking what is true and starts asking what if. What if I am losing them? What if there is someone else? What if I was never enough to keep in the first place? That is the first trap. Because what you feel there does not feel like fear. It feels like care. It feels like love. It feels like protection. But jealousy rarely introduces itself as insecurity. It arrives disguised as concern. And once that happens, almost anything can start to feel justified. Checking becomes clarity. Questioning becomes honesty. Control becomes protection. That is where the line starts moving. And once that line moves, people do things in the name of love that love was never meant to survive. They watch for changes in tone. They read danger into harmless messages. They ask the same question in different ways, not because they want truth, but because they want relief, and relief never lasts. That is the real engine of jealousy. Not love, not devotion, not intuition. Threat. A threat to your bond, your place, your importance, your sense of being chosen. And the worst part is, your brain does not need proof to sound the alarm. Ambiguity is enough. A delayed reply, a shift in energy, a private smile at a phone screen. That is all it takes for the mind to start building a case. And that is why two people can experience the exact same moment in completely different ways. One person sees nothing. Another feels panic. Why? Because jealousy is almost never just about the present. It is the present touching an older wound. The fear of being replaced. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of being humiliated. The fear of discovering that you were easier to lose than you thought. Jealousy is not the wound. Jealousy is the alarm system built around the wound. And once you understand that, possessive behavior starts making a terrible kind of sense. Because possessive people are not always driven by cruelty. A lot of them are driven by terror. Terror of losing control. Terror of not being enough. Terror that love, if left unguarded, will disappear. So they monitor. Sometimes openly, sometimes quietly. Who was that? Why did you reply so late? Why are you acting different? Why are you smiling at your phone? Why do I feel like something has changed? One question means nothing. But jealousy does not stay one question. It becomes a system. A system of checking. A system of decoding. A system of scanning for danger where trust used to live. And that is where relationships begin to rot from the inside. Because connection cannot breathe under surveillance. The jealous person thinks they are protecting the relationship. But what they are often doing is replacing trust with investigation. And once suspicion becomes the default setting, love starts changing shape. It becomes tense, defensive, explanatory. One person is always asking, the other is always proving. That is not intimacy. That is emotional interrogation, and the damage builds fast. The jealous person becomes hypervigilant, obsessive, unable to relax. The other person becomes careful, edited, less spontaneous. They start measuring their words, softening harmless details, avoiding innocent things because they know what it will trigger. And then that avoidance gets misread too. Now distance appears where there was originally only pressure. Now secrecy appears where there was originally only exhaustion. Now the jealous person looks at the damage their own behavior created and says, "See, I knew something was wrong." That is one of the cruelest loops in human psychology. Fear creates control. Control creates distance. Distance gets interpreted as danger. Danger justifies more control. And both people keep calling it love. It isn't. It is fear trying to become structure, and fear builds terrible homes. This gets even deeper when attachment enters the picture, because some people do not experience closeness as stable. They experience it as something that can vanish without warning. So when they feel even small distance, it does not register as minor. It registers as threat. A delayed reply feels enormous. A colder tone feels catastrophic. A private moment that has nothing to do with them feels like the beginning of abandonment. And from the outside, that reaction can look irrational. But inside the person, it feels completely logical. That is why jealousy is so hard to argue with. Because you are not arguing with an idea. You are arguing with someone's survival response. And survival responses do not care about fairness. They care about certainty, control, relief, even if the relief only lasts 10 minutes. That is why reassurance alone usually does not solve chronic jealousy. For a moment, it works. You explain, you comfort, you hand over proof, you calm the storm. Then the storm comes back. Because the real problem was never the message, never the coworker, never the laugh across the room. The real problem is the belief underneath all of it. I am replaceable. And once that belief takes hold, every neutral event gets pulled into its gravity. Your independence feels suspicious. Your happiness without them feels insulting. Your separate life feels like preparation for departure. This is where jealousy becomes dangerous, because it stops being pain and starts becoming permission. Permission to check. Permission to accuse. Permission to isolate. Permission to control who the other person talks to, where they go, and how much of themselves they are allowed to keep. And people rarely name that shift when it happens, because it does not look monstrous at first. It looks worried. It looks vulnerable. It looks like someone saying, "I just love you too much." But love that requires smaller and smaller versions of the other person is not love. It is possession with soft language. And the person on the receiving end gets trapped too. If they resist, they look defensive. If they explain, the questions multiply. If they comply, they start disappearing piece by piece. That is what makes chronic jealousy so destructive. It does not just hurt. It reorganizes the entire relationship around fear. And once fear becomes the operating system, everything gets mistranslated. Silence means danger. Privacy means betrayal. Boundaries mean secrecy. Independence means drift. There is no winning move inside that system, because the system was never designed for peace. It was designed for control. And control can imitate care for a very long time. Long enough for people to confuse being watched with being valued. Long enough to call panic devotion. Long enough to call possession loyalty. Long enough to destroy trust while claiming to defend it. Now, to be fair, jealousy itself is human. A flash of it does not make you toxic. A moment of it does not make you dangerous. The real question is, what happens next? Do you investigate yourself, or interrogate the other person? Do you face the wound, or build a cage? Do you tell the truth, which is "I feel scared," or do you tell the lie, which is "You made me do this"? That choice changes everything, because unmanaged jealousy does not stay an emotion. It becomes a climate, a pattern, a way of loving that slowly turns into ownership. So no, jealousy is not proof of love. It is proof that something in you feels threatened. And if you never learn to separate love from fear, you will eventually destroy what you were most afraid to lose. Not because you did not care, because you were terrified. And terror, when left unexamined, does not protect love. It devours it.